I have 3 questions for all of you. Do you want to learn how to become super smart? Do you want to think like super smart engineers? And do you have a MacBook? If your answer is yes to all the 3, then this 2-part video series on creating interactive prototypes with Play from scratch is for you. Now, this is going to be a long video because I'm going to take some of the most complex concepts of prototyping from Play, and I'm going to break that down and help you understand how to use it and when to use it, because you will be using these concepts pretty much many times when you're creating prototypes in Play. So let me quickly show you what we're going to be creating, and then we'll explain a couple of things, and then we can get started with the video. So basically what I have here is a prototype from the Airbnb app, which is their filters experience. And it's also something that Spotify also uses. And you have 4 tabs over here. And when I tap on the first tab, you can see that the button changes, and also it reveals the secondary tabs. And I can tap on any of these tabs to sort of set them to active and the inactive state. Super cool stuff. And if I go back and I can reset it, I can tap on experiences, and that moves to the left side, which is also very nice. I can do the same thing over here, and I can click on experience to go back, and that sort of resets it so that when I go back to homes, you can see that nothing is selected, right? And in experiences also, nothing is selected. So it's resetting everything. We also have different types of tabs, where you have traveling, which basically doesn't move any of the other primary tabs, but it deselects the first one. And then I can switch between these elements, all right? And they work really well, right? So it's a super dynamic and super fluid interaction, and this is basically what we're going to create. So now that you've seen what we're going to be creating, go to the link in the description and check out the app clip link, the link to the Figma file, and the Play project file as well, because you're going to need this to study, break things apart, and see how all of this works. So with that being said, let's get started. Now I'm going to start off in Figma. I'm going to explain a couple of things over here, and then we're going to go and set everything up slowly, step by step. And you can get a link to this Figma file down below in the description. And trust me, you're going to need it because it has a lot of information. So what I have here is basically all the states of, and basically all the possibilities of how the animation would look like at various stages. Right? So this is how it would look in the default state. When I tap on homes, this is how it would look: experiences, traveling, and support. So we've got all the various states over here. And this is just for us to visually see everything that we need to build and all the states that we need to create. And we can also create light mode and dark mode versions, as I mentioned before. So we're going to go ahead and do that in Play as well. We have to set up color variables, which should be super simple and straightforward. So let's start off by setting up each of these particular items in Play. Now, you can go ahead and construct this yourself in Play, but what I can do is I can go ahead and just copy this element and then come to Play, and then I'm going to go ahead and just paste that over here. It says there is an error, so that's okay if there is an error. All we have to do is right click, choose copy to selection, and then we can go back and paste this over here. So then it pastes over here, right? Now, we've got ourselves the element. The first thing that we want to do is go ahead and make this editable. So I can go ahead and click here to make it editable. And I basically have to upload the font. I'm using InterDisplay. You can download InterDisplay on the internet for free, or you can use any other font that you want. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and upload it. All right, so I've gone ahead and updated it. And I just want to make sure that this is in the center and everything looks fine. So if you come back here to Figma, you can see here that I have a top and bottom padding of 12. And just make sure that, let's just make sure that the height of the button is 40, right? So we can come over here, click on this frame, and we can see that the height is 39. I can just, just sort of round that off to 40. All right. And then we have 13 and 12 on the top and bottom. That's fine. This one has a height of 15. Here I have a height of 16. So I'm going to set the height of this to 16, and that should be fine, right? It does look like it's a little bit towards the bottom, but I guess that's not really a big problem for us. We're just going to leave it as it is. You can go around and play around with the padding if you want. All right. Now I'm going to start by going ahead and customizing a couple of things over here. So I'm going to, first of all, I'm going to go ahead and call this primary pill. All right. I'm going to explain later on why this is called primary pill. Go ahead and call this label. All right. And also go ahead and call this label, because this is going to be our master component. I'm going to click on this to create it into a component. And I'm also going to click on this one, which is going to summon the main component. So that's essentially an instance, and this is going to be our main component. All right, there we go. Now, what we want to do is we want to assign colors to this. So here, we want to go ahead and apply the colors. So we already have a background. What I want to do is go ahead and set up essentially color styles. All right. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come here to styles. And here we have all the styles that we can set up. I'm going to start off by setting a color style. All right. So This one is essentially going to be called surface primary. I'm going to go ahead and call this surface underscore primary. This is going to be our primary color. And this is going to be F2, F2, F2. So I'm just type in F2, 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 all right, 100%. And I'm also going to go ahead and add the dark mode appearance. Now for the dark mode, I already have those colors set up. So I'm going to click on this one. I'm going to see 1C, 1C, 1E. I'm going to go ahead and paste that in. And then we have our dark mode color also fully set. And now all I have to do is click on this, come here to the background and set this one to the color styles and choose surface primary. And that's it. We are good to go. I want to do the same thing for the text as well. So the text you can see here has a color of 212121. So I'm going to come over here, create a new, call this text primary, text underscore primary. All right. And this is going to be 212121. All right. And then I'm going to go ahead and click on dark appearance. And then we want this one to be complete white. Right. Perfect. So now we have this setup. Now, in order to just make sure that it's working correct, we can go ahead and check this on the simulator. So you can click on the play button, choose open, and you can choose whichever device you want. All right. And I'm going to go ahead and now set this to dark mode. And then you can see that it almost works. It didn't work because we forgot to go ahead and set the color over here. So we're going to click on this to the side and we'll click on solid. Actually, not that solid. I'm going to click here on the styles and choose text primary. And now you can see that it should work really well. Now, a couple of things here with the simulator. You can go ahead and choose which theme. You can go ahead and decide if you want to add the bezel, the status bar. And also you can choose whether you want it to stay on top on the interface all the time or it gets hidden. All right. You can choose to save screenshot, record video. You can do all of these super cool stuff. All right. So now what we want to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to add another state to this, right? So this one is in light mode. I'm going to go ahead and click on this in the main editor. So now here, I'm going to go ahead and add the selected state. I'm going to click on this and I'm going to double click over here and rename this to be called active state. Just call it active, all right? And now we want to change the settings. So over here in the active state, you can see over here, the color changes to this color. So I'm going to copy this. Now I'm going to add a color style to this again. So I'm going to come over here and this one is called surface underscore primary. And here I'm going to go ahead and choose inverted. All right. Or we can go ahead and choose, call this active if we want. All right. And I'm going to go ahead and paste this. All right. And in the dark mode appearance, I'm going to go ahead and choose this color, which is F2, F2, F2. Copy that. And I'm going to go ahead and paste that here as well. And I think even for the text primary, I think in the dark mode, I will set that to F2, F2, F2. All right. Just a very super subtle difference. Okay. Nice. So we've got ourselves the surface primary active. Now I also want the text primary active. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new one. This is going to be called text underscore primary underscore active. And over here, this is going to be F2, F2, F2. All right. And in the dark mode, it is going to be this color, which is pure black. So I'm going to go ahead and just set this to pure black. All right. Amazing. So now I'm going to click on this one. And here in the background, instead of surface primary, I'm going to choose surface primary active. And in the text color, I'm going to go ahead and choose text primary active over here. All right. So now we've got the selected inactive, the default state and the active state, right? Which is the deselected state and the selected state. All right. There we go. So now if I go ahead and make a duplicate of this, all right. And here I can just change this to active state so we can see what's going on. And I can click on this, open up the simulator again. And once we have the simulator open, so now you can see how this looks in both the active and inactive state. You can go back to the light mode and then you can see it inverts, right? So this is working perfectly well for us. Awesome. Next, we want to do the secondary pill. So it's essentially these pills over here, right? So I'm going to go ahead and copy this, or I can right click, choose copy link to selection, go ahead and paste that over here. It's going to paste it from Figma, do the same thing over here, make this editable and make sure that we have the same value. So this is going to be 40. This one, I'm going to set that to 16 and we should be good to go. All right. So over here, I'm going to move this over here. Just rename this to be called label. Right. Rename this also to label. All right. And this one is going to be called secondary pill. All right. And I'm going to make this into a component. Perfect. All right. Now, over here, I'm going to go ahead and add a background color. Now here, what I can do is, in this case, if you see, the background color is actually just the 100% pure black. So what I can do is I can go ahead and use the one that they are already using. So if I click on this, there should be the default one that they're using. Right, there we go. So in system, I can go ahead and choose background. All right, so that's the background color. Perfect. And now for the text, we're going to use the same text that we had, which is content primary. So sorry, text primary, just add that over here by default. Now we also have this stroke. So I'm going to go ahead and get the color of the stroke, which is essentially this one, DEDDEE, and create a new one. And I'm going to go ahead and call this stroke underscore primary, or probably, yeah, stroke underscore border underscore, or let's call it border underscore, right? So border underscore primary, I'm going to paste that and click on the dark mode to get the dark mode color. And over here, I'm going to copy this one and I'm going to paste this over here. So we've got the dark mode as well. I'm going to come over here, and in the border color, I can click on this, click on the settings, and here I've got the fill. I'm going to click on that, open up our styles, and then choose border primary, and we should be good to go. Now, another thing that you see here is that the stroke thickness of this is 1, but in the active state, it's actually 2. It's a little bit more thicker. So what we'll do now is we're going to go ahead and open up the main editor. All right. And this is where we will create the active state. I'm going to go ahead and call this active. All right. And now what we'll do here is, in the active state, you can see that now this one is now black in color. All right. So I'm going to create a new token. All right. I'm going to go ahead and call this border. I'm going to go ahead and call this active. All right. Or maybe call border primary active. All right. So in the active state, it's going to be black, or in fact, not black. I'm going to go ahead and apply this color because we can match this color. So I'm going to copy that, paste that over here. And in dark mode, we will use this color, which is F2, F2, F2. All right. I made it to F, but we can use F2, F2, F2. Copy that. And I'm going to come over here and paste this over here in dark mode. All right. So now over this variant, I'm going to go ahead. We're going to keep the background as it is. In the border, I'm going to come over here, click on this, set the border width to 2, and also change this to the border primary active. I don't know why it went over there. Anyway, so now this is how it looks. It's a little difficult to see, but that's okay. We're going to come back over here. I'm going to delete these two, make a duplicate of the secondary pill. I'm going to duplicate this one again. This one will go to the active state. So this is basically the inactive and the active state. And then we can quickly go ahead and check to see how this looks. All right. This looks perfectly fine. Go ahead and choose dark mode. You can see this is how it looks in dark mode. Also perfectly fine, right? Now, the thing is, some of these also have this chevron, right? So we want to add this, and also there's this additional piece of text. Now, the thing here is that this chevron is always visible, and this piece of text is something that we can add. So technically, there are 4 variants. So the 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now, what we can do is we have 2 options. Either we make 2 versions of a secondary pill, which works, or we can just put all of them together. Either of that works. Depending on what you choose, the way we set things up, the way we set up the interactions are going to change a little bit, but it's not really that big of a difference. So in this case, to keep things simple, I'm going to go ahead and make sure that all of this is one variant. So I'm going to start off by copying this chevron. I'm going to Control C, copy that. And I'm going to come over here, go to the secondary pill. I'm going to click on this default, and I'm going to paste that over here. It's going to throw me an error. So I'm going to try that again with copy link selection and then paste, right? And now it's going to paste the chevron for me. I'm going to click on this and just change the orientation to right side. So now everything moves to the right side. Oh, let's try that again. Right side. There we go. Now I'm going to gap of 8 pixels. So let me just go ahead and set the gap here to 8 pixels. Now we also want to apply the same set of colors to this. So I can click on the carry down. I'm going to probably just go ahead and rename this to chevron. And over here in the tint is where I can choose the color. So now this is like an SVG. So because you can see it's an SVG, so I can select the color. I'm going to choose the same thing as the text primary. That's basically what I want to choose. All right. And now when you add it to the primary one, it also goes to the secondary one. All right. So you need to make sure that the primary has all the components that you need, and you can hide and show items later on, right? It's not in Figma where it's a little different. You have to have all the components and all the variants and all the atoms inside the master one, which is the first one over here. All right. Perfect. Now we have this additional piece of text. So what we can do, I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this one. All right. For some reason, it changed everything completely. So let me try that again. I'm going to copy paste. Yeah, copy paste works. Paste this again. I'm going to double click, press Option Shift 9 to get a small dot. And here I'm just going to type in 0. All right. Because it's a number. And then I can select all of these elements. Right. And here maybe we can go ahead and rename this to dot. This is going to be called number. Right. And you can see that gets updated here as well. And then I'll select all of them together. I'm going to press Shift A to auto layout. Oh, in fact, let's try that again. Select all this, Shift A to auto layout. Perfect. Now the gap here is around 2 pixels. So I'm going to go ahead and set that also to 2 pixels. Now, here's the thing. I don't want this to be visible in the first state. So I'm going to click on the stack here. I'm just going to go ahead and call this text wrapper. Okay. And I'm going to click on this dot and hide that. And even the number, hide that. Now that hides that over here. And we can override that over here. Go ahead and turn on the dot and turn on the number. All right. But here's the thing. I don't want it to happen to this variant. All right. I'm going to go ahead and turn off the chevron as well for the first one. And then all of this. All right. So these two is going to be one set. I'm going to go ahead and create a new variant. And here I'm going to go ahead and call this drop down underscore default. Now I'm using the word default over here because I want to just make sure that it's easy to differentiate between the normal default and the drop down default. Here we will have the chevron present. I'm going to create a new duplicate. This one is going to be called drop down underscore active. Okay. And over here, I'm going to have the chevron and also make sure that the text is available. All right. So now we have all the 4 variants present. We can go back over here and we can do a quick test run. I'm going to duplicate these two. This one is going to be called drop down default. This one is going to be called drop down active. All right. And for this one, we need to go back and add that color. So I'm going to click on this one, come here to the border, click on this, set this to 2. And in the fill, I'm going to go ahead and choose border primary active. And that should be pretty good. So if you go over here, this is basically what we have. And I can also check this quickly in the simulator to make sure that everything is perfect. All right. And so looks great in dark mode, and in light mode also looks perfect. Right. So everything works well. Now, the next thing for us is to go ahead and do the all button. All right. So let's start off with that. Now, in this case, even though this is the sort of default state, I'm going to make the inactive state as default because that's what we're basically doing. So I'm going to click on this one. I'm going to right click. Now, before actually I do that, you can see here that even though this looks visually similar to this, I'm going to make this its own component. I'm going to make this its own component, mainly because this doesn't have the exact same states as these, right? This one has like a back arrow. It also has like this filled state. Now, because this has multiple different states, I don't want to take a risk of, making it the same master component as the primary pill. I'm going to make this its own separate component. All right. So I'm going to go ahead, right click, or actually, you know what? To be very honest, I can take this primary pill. I'm going to duplicate this one. I'm going to right click on this and I'm going to say detach instance, all right? So that we don't have to construct this from scratch. Now I'm going to go ahead and call this all pill, all right? And then I'm going to make this into a component, all right? I'm going to go ahead and call this label as it is. We can keep that as it is. We can go to the main editor, all right? And now we're going to add multiple states. So the first one is going to go ahead and create that active state, all right? So in the active state, we just want to reset the colors. So I'm going to come over here. Surface primary is going to be surface primary inverted. Let's surface primary active. Sorry. Yeah. And actually, let me just rearrange this. So I have surface primary. I'm going to have surface primary active, text primary active, and border primary active. Perfect. And I'll click on this text. And this text is going to be text primary active. All right. Great. Now we're going to go ahead and create the back button now. So I'm going to create a new state. All right. Now over here, we don't need the label. So I'm going to click on the label and I'll go ahead and just hide that. All right. Now, actually, let me not hide that. I'm going to go ahead and first of all, set this to back. All right. Now, what I want to happen here is I actually want this thing to sort of animate from right to left. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just copy this first of all. Right click, go to copy to selection, and I'll come over here and paste it in the master, the first one. All right, just zoom in over here. I'll go ahead and paste that over here. There we go. Let's just quickly go ahead and change this orientation. All right, perfect. 20 seems to be fine, I guess. Maybe we want to reduce it down. I don't know. I think maybe we reduce it down to 16 by 16. Boom. All right, that's okay. And let's apply those colors first. So I'm going to go ahead and choose text primary active, or actually just text primary. Sorry, that one, right? And now that gets added everywhere over here as well. Now, in this case, we don't really need it. So over here, I'm going to hide that arrow. Also go ahead and call this arrow. All right. And what we want to do now is, because we want things to animate, what I will basically do is I'm going to click on this element and I'm going to choose this option that says pin to. What that basically does is that it removes it from auto layout. And that's essentially the same thing as clicking on this one, which says ignore auto layout, right? So this one is going to ignore auto layout. So I'm going to click on pin to, send it to the center, right? And I'm going to move it around 20 pixels to the right side. So I'm just going to move it 20 pixels. All right, there we go. And I'm also going to go ahead and reduce the opacity of this to 0. And also going to go ahead and set the scale of this to 0. So essentially, basically, it's like doing smart animate in Figma. All right, nice. Now, the next thing over here is on this one. All right, we have the arrow visible. So I'm going to go ahead and set this opacity back to 100. Let's click on the arrow. Set the opacity back to 100 and also the scale to 100. And then you can see that the X offset was basically moved to 20 pixels. It's essentially X offset is the offset from the axis. So I'm going to go ahead and set this back to 0 so that it comes to the center. Now we want this label piece of text. All right. I want to move this to -20 so that you can see it moves a little bit over to the left side. All right. And then I'm going to go ahead and set the opacity of this to 0. Actually, even the scale of this, I want the scale of this to be 0 and also the opacity of this also to 0 so that we have a nice animation. So and if you come on this, come over here, I'm going to take the all bill, bring that over here, put these together. All right. In fact, we can probably make this one below the other, or actually we can just keep that as it is. And I'm going to delete all this one. We don't need this. Just to make sure that we get all of this. I'm going to duplicate this one. This one is going to be active. Duplicate this one. This is going to be back. Just to first of all to see if the things are different. Now in the back, we got a couple more things to do. Actually, we need to add this border and we want to change the color over here. So come back to the all pill. In the back version, I'm going to go ahead and click on this. All right. First, I'm going to add a stroke. Now the thing here is that here, there's no stroke. Here, there's no stroke. But we want to animate things in play. We need to make sure that all the properties exist across all the components. Now, what does that mean? Now I'm going to come over here to the main one. And here, I'm going to add the stroke, all right, border. All right. I'm going to go ahead and set the color to basically a border primary. All right. Correct. But what I will also do is I'm going to set the opacity of this to 0. The thing is, I want the border to exist. The animation is going to break if one variant has the border and one variant does not. So in this case, we're going to keep the border, but set the opacity of that to 0, right? And that's going to do the same thing over here. And on this one, we're going to go back and set the opacity of this to 100% so that it is visible. I'm also going to click on this, change the color from surface primary to background. So I'm going to go ahead and set this to background, which is what was given out of the box, right? So now if we go back over here, this is what we get, which looks correct, right? Now you can also see that this is actually not the correct size. So I'm also going to go ahead and reduce the size of this, right? So I'm going to go ahead and set the width of this to 40% or 40 pixels actually, right? And now this is basically what we have. So now I can go ahead, open up the simulator again. And now we can check if the colors are correct. So this one looks perfect. Go ahead and set this to dark. This also looks fine. Here it doesn't seem to be working. So let's quickly check what the issue is in the all pill. So I'm going to click on the main one, all right? And we can keep this open so that we can quickly check everything all the time. So I'm going to start off by going into light mode, right? So this is basically what we have in light mode, all right? This looks fine. I'm going to make sure that I've applied the right border. So maybe move this all over to the left. So I'm going to click on this, click on the gear here. I'm going to make sure that I choose this again. I'm going to choose border primary, which is all I need, which is fine. And now in this active state, all right, I don't need it. So I can go ahead and actually I don't need it here also. So I'm going to click on this one, click on this, set the opacity of this to 0. And in the active one also, it ends up going to 0. And on the back one here, this is where I will turn this back to 100. And in fact, this is again supposed to be border primary, all right? And I set that to 100. So now you can go to the main one and check. So this one looks correct. Now, if I go ahead and set this to dark mode, this also looks correct. So we've got all our various states set up over here, right? So this is how you go ahead and set up all the states. And now we can go ahead and start animating this. Now that we have set this up, what we can do is we can go to Figma and we can set up the actual items that we need in order to start animating. Now, one most important thing to think about over here is depending on how you set up and group your items, the way you set up animations are going to completely change. So whatever you're trying to do, make sure you go ahead and follow exactly as I'm doing, because if you make a small mistake, the interaction is going to break, right? Because the way we set things up is going to be super important for us to figure out the right triggers and animations. So what does that mean? Now, to make things easier, I've gone ahead and created this section called as structure. And this is what we're going to use. I'm going to explain later on why we set it up like this, but this is exactly how we need to set it up. So essentially what you have over here, maybe I can bring this down. What we have over here is one container, which is going to have this, and then all of the secondary pills that we created are going to be in one container. Similarly over here, this one is again, so traveling, experiences, and homes are at the same level. This one doesn't have a secondary container, so that's fine. Neither does this, right? And then we group all of this into this, right? So this whole thing becomes one section, and then this one is going to be just outside, wrapped up in this one parent. So this is how we're going to go ahead and set all of this up, right? So let's go ahead and create this. We can use this as a reference, or actually we can just use this one as a reference, right? So how do we do that? I'm going to be very quick over here and we'll try to do this as soon as possible. So this is the all pill. I'm going to go ahead and call this all. Now, by default, we want this to be in the active state. So we can keep that to be active. And then we have homes, which is going to bring in our first primary pill. I'm going to drop that over here. This is going to be called homes. All right. And then I'll bring in the secondary pill. Drop that over here. And over here, we have unread, trip stage, and starred. So we have unread. Duplicate this 2 times. This is going to be called trip stage and starred. All right. Now the trip stage is actually supposed to be in the drop down default state because we need that chevron over here. And then we're going to click on, we select all of these 3 things together. I'm going to press Shift A. All right. So put this into a group. Now this has a gap of 8 pixels, I believe. So I can come over here and we can just check that. I think it's all 8 pixels. So that's fine. I'm going to first of all set the direction to be horizontal. Set the gap of this to be 8, which is perfect. I'm going to go ahead and call this secondary stack. All right. Then we'll select these 2 together. All right. Move this over to the right side. This is going to be called primary stack. All right. So we have the primary stack, which has the primary pill. And then we have the secondary stack, which has the secondary pills. This is exactly how we want to set things up. Right. This is the structure that we're going to need. Now select this. Duplicate this one, right? And this one is going to be called experiences. Then we have unread, group messages, and start. So unread, this is going to be called group messages, and this one is going to be start again. Now this second one doesn't have to be drop down default. We just need the default state, and this is fine. Now then we have traveling and support. So I'm going to go ahead and in this primary stack, I'm going to duplicate this by pressing Command D. All right. So this is our primary stack. Now in the primary stack, we only need the primary pill. We don't need the stack. So this primary pill that we have, this one is going to be called, as we see, traveling and then support, right? So this is going to be called traveling. I'm going to duplicate this primary stack again. And then this one is going to be called support, right? Amazing. Now I'm going to put all of this together in one group, as you can see over here. Press Shift A, all right? And I'm going to move this over to the gap of 8, set it to horizontal like this, so that now you can see all of this, how this looks like, all right? And then this one is going to be called filters stack, all right? And then we have this all pill, and then I'm going to put this two into an auto layout, press Shift A, all right? And then it's going to load, move this to the right side, 8 pixel, and then this is going to be called main stack. All right. And then I can just call this filters screen, call this like that, right? So we have the main stack. Here we have the filters stack, and then we have the primary stack. And then inside that, we have the primary pill and the secondary stack inside that and all this. This structure is exactly compared to similar as this structure. And we need it to be exactly like this. And I want to explain to you why it needs to be like this later on when I set up the interactions. But the more organized and systematic it is, the better it is going to be, right? So this is how we want to set this up. All right. Now, if you want, we can also click on this filters, all right? And we can move this to the center of the screen. So I can click on the distribution center. So now it's in the center. We can also add some padding if we want to the main stack, to the top and bottom, just a little bit of padding so we can see what's going on. I'm going to say 32, 32, 32, and 32, just so that we have some room over here. All right. So now this is basically how it should work. So now click on the filter screen, come over here and choose open in the simulator. And let's set this to light. All right. And then you can see that you can scroll. You've got this nice bounce effect that you see on iOS devices, and got this also, right? So we basically have everything set up. Of course, nothing is going to work because we haven't set up any interactions whatsoever, but this is how we want to set things up, all right? So now that this is set up, we can go ahead and start setting up interactions slowly, one at a time. Okay, so now let's go ahead and start creating the interactions. Now, the first thing that we want to do is make sure that when the prototype loads, we don't want to show all of these items over here, right? You can see all of these secondary items we don't need to see. Now, there are two ways to hide them. Now, what we want to do is on loading the screen, we want to hide them. Now, this is where the structure that we set up comes into place. Now, let me explain what we're going to do here. I'm going to close this up. I'm going to open up, and actually we don't even need this. I'm going to open up the main stack, all right? And I'm going to open up the secondary stack, right? This is the secondary stack that we want to hide, which is essentially this one and this one. Now, to be very honest, what I can actually do is I'm going to add some background color so we can actually see what is happening, all right? So I'm going to go ahead and just add a little bit of background color over here. No, doesn't work. Why is it not? Okay, let's just set this to 100. Got it, right? So I'm going to set this to this red color. I'm going to copy this and add this as well. So we have this, the other one, which has the secondary stack. I'm going to add the color there as well. So just go ahead and paste that color. There we go, right? So this is essentially what we have. And I'm also going to go ahead and keep this screen visible at all times so you guys can get an idea. Right? So basically, this is how it's going to look, all right? Now, what we're going to do is we're going to basically say that, hey, when the screen loads, I want you to hide this secondary stack and this secondary stack. Now, there are two ways to do this. The first way is to hard code. And what hard code means here is I am going to target specifically this one and this one. So what does that mean? So whenever you want to set interactions, you want to press 4 on your keyboard or click here to come to the interaction tab. All right. So if you see me switching between design and interaction, you can see that I'm using the numbers 3 and 4. All right. I'm going to go ahead and press A on my keyboard to add an interaction. I'm going to type in event. All right. Now we've got a couple of events. We can forget about all of that. Let's just choose page event, right? So basically when this page particularly loads, all right, we've got a bunch of other options. We can ignore that. We wanted to hide this. Now to hide this, I'm going to go ahead and type in hidden. All right, we're going to say set hidden, which is an action. So this is a trigger, this is an action. Now, as you can see over here, it hid everything, right? Because the target is the self and we've applied it to the main stack. So it just basically hid everything. That's not what we want to do. What we want to do is we can actually choose the target of this secondary stack that you see over here, right? The secondary stack. And if I close all of this up, you can basically see what it is. Maybe move this all, I mean, also probably move this over to the left side, click on this one, and here we can choose this secondary stack. All right. Now you can see that the first set of stack was hidden and this one is still there. Now what we can do is we can duplicate this, Command D, and we can go ahead and we can choose this also to be secondary stack. So now both of that is hidden. Now this way is called hard coding. Now the problem with hard coding is if let's say we add another filter, all right, which also has secondary, then I have to duplicate this one as well. And so your prototype is basically has too much logic that's there and you're giving very specific instructions. This is not the right way to make prototypes. We need to go ahead and set logic. So what should be the logic to make this work? Now, what we want to do is give an instruction that applies to multiple items, right? We don't want to give the same instruction to multiple items individually, which is called as hard coding. We want to give one instruction and then it is automatically applied to the appropriate items and the action is triggered. Now, what does all of this mean? Now, in this case, if we think about the logic, what we want is to make sure that in these primary stacks, we always want to hide the item, which is the second child. So in this primary stack, we want to hide this one. In this one, we want to hide this one. And then in this one, it doesn't exist, but if there was, we would hide it. And in this case also, if there was, we would hide it. So which means that I want to give one instruction saying that check all the primary stacks and all hide the second child of the primary stack. Now, how do we do that? Now, when we want to go ahead and give an instruction to multiple items at the same time, we want to go ahead and use a concept called as loop. Now, let me explain what that is. So I'm going to go ahead and press A on my keyboard and I'm going to go ahead and we already have the event trigger. Do we not have it? Okay. I guess I'll add it. Yeah, we want to click on this one. Yeah. So we already have the event trigger over here and here as well, we will have it. I'm going to go ahead and type in loop and choose the third one, which is loop.children. Now, what this basically does is that the instruction that I give is going to be applied to all the specific children of a particular parent. Now, because I want this to be the target child, I want this is going to be the child, which means the parent is going to be this filter stack, all right? Because now this is going to check all of these children, all right? So when you want to go ahead and add a condition or a logic or affect all of the children, you want to add a loop to the child. So then when you give it an instruction, it's going to go to all the children of the parent that you selected. So it's going to perform a set of actions of basically checking or hiding something. In this case, we want to hide the secondary stack, right? So it'll go ahead and hide the secondary stack in this one. And then it's going to go to the next one, see what is the second item, hide that, and then come here, see what is the second item, hide that, and the same thing over here. So what we want to do here is we want to now set up that logic. So I'm going to click on this plus over here and I'm going to type in hide. All right, I'm going to say set hidden. Now, when you do that, you can see that it hid everything because what you see it's happening over here is the target is called loop.item. And in short, loop.item is equal to child. It's as simple as that, right? It is the child of the parent that you selected, which is why it's hiding all of the items. This is the easiest way to explain. It's targeting each of the children, which is called loop.item, and then it's hiding it. But that's not what we want to do. We want to hide the child of the child. So now we want to select a specific child. Now, how do we do that? So what we want to do is I'm going to click on this and I'm just going to delete this condition. Now we want to target a child in the specific place, which is the second place. So I'm going to go ahead and type in child at index. Now, as you can see over here, it says we target a specific child by its index number. I'm going to go ahead and press enter. So now I'm going to go ahead and select the specific child. Now, because I want to select this item, all right, which is in the second place, it's asking me to fill in two properties. I have to select the parent and then I have to select the index. Now, the parent of this child is actually this primary stack. Now, what is primary stack? What is another word for that? Child. What is another word for that is loop.item. So now I can click on this parent, just type in loop, select the second item, dot item. All right. You can see it targets the each child. All right. And now in the index, I have to enter the position number. Now here, when we're doing basic counting, we say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But in code, it's actually 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the index of this second child is actually 1. So this is 0, this is 1. So I'm going to go ahead and type in 1. And now when I press enter, you can see it hides away the secondary stack of all the other items. So if I scroll over here, you can see these don't even have any secondary items. So it's not hiding it. But in this case, it has secondary items, homes and experiences. So it's hiding that because we set this over here. Now, if you didn't get this, go back and watch it. It should be easy to understand. So that's how we use the concept of loops to target specific items here and there. All right. Perfect. All right. Now, let's go ahead and start animating this so that we can actually test out some interactions. Now, the first thing that we want to do is over here, you can see that I've set up a structure over here. Now, I've broken this into multiple parts. The first one is what I would call as a reveal animation. So when a particular tab is selected, then it essentially reveals something. All right. And the other one is, if I come to the right side, which we'll look at later, is the reset animation, is where we come back to the initial state. Right. So forget about the resetting. Let's start off with the simple one. So I've broken this down, and you want to set up some sort of like a timeline system over here to make this a little easier. So here I have various states. So let's say the filters was in this state, and when I tapped on homes, this is how it would look like, right? So you would get the back button, this home would be selected, and then the child, the secondary pills would appear, and then the primary pills would disappear. If you tapped on experiences, then the experience would actually move to the left, and then you would have all this also coming. So tapping on homes and experiences pretty much does the same thing. And this is another case where traveling is selected, all right, and which is another state, because here all is selected, here all is deselected. This is another state where you tap on home or experiences, then we end up in the same state where all the other primary pills goes away, and then we have the secondary pills appear, and then this changes to a back button. All right, this is another case where if I tap on traveling, then it does something different. It doesn't hide off all the primary ones. It keeps the primary ones as it is, but then it just sets this one to the inactive state. Same thing with support. And here, in this case, it just toggles on and off traveling and support. So in this case, you can see that the all button is being switched, is turning to the inactive state. In this case, the all button is already as it is. It's just that it's toggling between these two. Now, how do we set up a structure like this without hard coding too much? Now, what I've basically done is I've gone ahead and written down all the actions that was performed when this event or this situation occurs. So let me explain what this means. So over here in homes, when I tap on homes, we want a lot of things to happen. First of all, whichever primary pill that I tapped on, in this case, let's say homes, experiences, traveling, or support, we want that tapped primary pill to become active. Right now it's inactive, it becomes active. The second thing is all the other primary pills, which is experiences, traveling, and support. In this case, as you can see, they disappear, right? So that's why I've set it to hidden. Now you can ignore this one. I'm going to come to this later. Then the third thing is the secondary pills that you see over here are now visible. So the secondary pills get visible. All right, it was not visible, it was visible. And the last one is this all pill that you see over here goes from this state to the back state, right? Now, what about in this case, right? Because whether I'm tapping on this when the filters look like this, or whether I'm tapping on the same item when the filters look like this, it needs to run the same condition, right? So what this means is over here in homes, because the end state is the same, I need to make sure that when I tap on this or when I tap on this in either of the states, the end result looks the exact same. So what I want to do here is, let's check this again. So when I tap on homes in this state, I want the tapped primary pill to come active, which it is. The other primary pills needs to go away. So experiences, traveling, and support, they need to go away, which as you can see over here. The other primary pills also need to become in the inactive state. So essentially, not only do I need to turn traveling from active to inactive, I also have to hide it. So I have to do these things together, which is why also I had written over here, but this is not specifically needed for this interaction, but it can still perform the action. It's just that visually we will not see anything because nothing will actually change, but it will run this action, right? And then the secondary pills will appear when I tap on this or experiences, and then the all pill will go to back. So pretty much these two are pretty much the exact same set of actions, whether I tap on homes or whether I tap on experiences. Now coming to this one, all right? Here I'm tapping on traveling or support. Let's see what's happening. Now in this case, when I tap on traveling, all right, I want the tapped primary pill to become active, which it is. I want all the other primary pills to become inactive. I don't want them to disappear. Here we are setting them to hidden. I don't want that to disappear. I just want it to be inactive state. So all the other primary pills you can see over here are going to the inactive state. So homes, experiences, support, they will continue to be inactive. All right. But in this case, even though we run it, nothing is going to happen in the background because the pills are not really active. So what I can essentially do is I can actually just make sure I copy this color and paste this over here. All right. So we will still set the condition. It will still trigger the action, but nothing visually will happen. Now we don't need this condition regarding secondary pills. So I'm just actually going to delete that. We don't need that because secondary pills are not even being affected over here. All right. And the last one is the all pill is going to go from active to the inactive state. All right. So this is what happens whether I tap on traveling or support in either of these cases. Now, if I come over here, in this case, when traveling is selected and I tap on support, first of all, I want the tapped primary pill to become active. So support is going to become active. The other primary pills, which you can see homes, experiences, and traveling, need to become inactive. Now, because I'm tapping on the same interaction and the end result looks the same, that's why I added this condition also, but then I just disabled it just because that it will visually not affect, but the action is still going to be triggered. Visually, we will not see anything because everything is already in the inactive state, as you can see over here. And this all pill is going to go from inactive to inactive. And here we don't need to change the color because it's going to be the same. So I'm going to go ahead and set this to black. And this is also going to be black. So first you want to set up a map like this. Now we're going to go ahead and dive a little bit more deeper. Now the question is, how do we set all of this up? Now, if we hard code, then we can say for each tab, we can go ahead and set a specific set of actions. For homes, do this, experiences, do this, traveling, do this, and support, do this. But that's not how we want it to do. What we want to do is we want to come up with a logic saying that if I tap on any of the primary tab, I want you to do a few checks. The first thing that I want you to check is see if it has these secondary children, right? If it has secondary children, or basically these secondary pills, then perform these actions. If it does not, then perform these actions. The reason we're setting this up is, let's say we add another filter without secondary filters, and let's say we add another one with filters. If we add, let's say 4 to 5 more extra filters, then we shouldn't have to really go and apply the condition to each of those filters. We apply the logic once. The system is then going to check whether it's a filter, whether it has secondary filters or not. If it has secondary filters, doesn't matter which child it is, it's going to go ahead and trigger these two. All right. If it doesn't have, it's going to follow this condition. So this is how the system is going to work. And we're going to go ahead and set up this logic. So what I can do is I can change this a little bit over here. So tapping on a primary pill that has secondary pills as siblings, and this one tapping on a primary pill that does not have secondary pills as siblings. All right, this is how we're going to set this condition. Now we're going to actually start off by creating a simple interaction of changing the state, so tapping on and off. So let's start off with that. Bring in the simulator. All right, so we can just keep looking at this on the side. All right, I'm going to go to primary pill and we're going to add that interaction over here, or we could add that here as well. But the problem is if I add it over here, you guys won't be able to see it properly. So I'm just going to click on this and now we can see this in the center. This is perfect. So now I'm going to, in the interaction mode, I'm going to click on the primary pill. All right, and I'm going to press A. All right, now over here, I'm going to say touch down, because first what we want to do is we want to go ahead and make sure that I can press and release for it to change the state. So we're not going to use a tap. We're going to use something called as a touch up, touch down. Now, touch down is basically press down. Touch up is when you release your finger. That's about it, right? It's like pressing and removing your finger. Now, we could do this separately, or we could use something called as a prefab, which is like a preset, which you also have access to, which makes things a little bit easier. Now, in this case, I'm not going to use the prefab because we want to customize this quite a lot, which I can, but a lot of you may not have paid accounts, and without a paid account, you won't be able to go ahead and customize the prefab. So we're not going to use the prefab. We're going to set up this interaction from scratch by ourselves. So I'm going to start off by choosing touch down, because when I press down, we want to do something. So when I click on this, when I touch down, when I press down, I want to go ahead and set the scale, all right, of the element that I tapped on. You can see the target is self, and I want to scale that down, not to a value of 0, right? Because if I click on this, you can see that it just disappears, all right? So I'm going to reset that. We want to scale it down from 100% to 94%, all right? And I also want it to animate, because right now if I see, it just suddenly shrinks. We don't want that. We want it to animate. So click on animate. And here we can choose a bunch of stuff, all right? I'm going to go with default intensity. I'm going to set the duration to 0.15 because we want it to be basically pretty subtle. So as you can see, you can do that. Now, the thing is, it doesn't come back up. And the reason it does not come back up is because we haven't set that up. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this one. I'm going to click on this one. And here I'm going to say touch up. And this is when I release my finger. I'm going to set this back to 100 and we have this. So now if I click on this, you can see this is basically what we get. All right. If you want, we can set the duration to 0.2, maybe a little bit more. 0.2 and 0.2. Let's see if this is better. Yeah, this one seems to be fine. Now we also want to set some haptic feedback so that when I release my finger, I can also feel the vibration. So I can go ahead and type in haptic. Now you obviously won't feel this on your MacBook, but you can, if you're testing it on your phone, it's going to work. So come over here, choose impact and just choose light, right? Something subtle. Perfect. Now, here's the thing. When I release my finger, I actually wanted to change the state. So how do we actually do that, right? Because I wanted to change the state when I release my finger. So now for it to change the state, I need to add a new property called as set state, right? So in this set state, because I'm targeting the element that I'm tapping on, so the target is self because that's the element that this trigger is on, I can change the state from the default state to the active state that we set up. I can also set this to animate. And here I can go ahead and set the duration to 0.2. And here I'm going to set it to default because I don't want any bounce effect. So if I click on this and release, you can see it quickly switches to the one that we want, right? Now, here's the problem. When I click here again and release, you can see it doesn't go back. So how do I actually make this work? So what we need to do here is we need to set up a condition saying that if it is in the inactive state, then go to the active state. If it is in the active state, then go to the inactive state. Now the question is, how do we do this? So what we want to do is we want to go step by step. So when I touch down, all right, when I press my finger down, all right, and I release my finger, when I'm releasing my finger, you need to decide what state to change it to. So for example, here I'm going to click on touch up. I'm going to say condition. All right. Here I'm going to say if the current state of this when I release my finger is in the inactive state, then set it to the active state. If it is in the active state, set it to the inactive state. So now how do we identify the state of this element? So we're going to go ahead and add a condition to figure this out. So to do this, we're going to add an expression. So I'm going to say self because first I want to identify the element. All right. So I'm going to say self because this is the element that I'm actually tapping on. Dot current state. So you can see here it says the current state of the object. And you can also see it gives you the expression object.current state. Press enter. If the current state is equal to, all right, now we need to fetch the states. So I'm going to say self dot states. So basically we can list all the states of this component dot. Now we have all of the states. Now we have default, we created active, disabled, highlighted, selected are already given to us for free, but we don't need that. So what this basically means is if the current state is in the default state, which means inactive state, all right, then you go ahead and set it to the active state. If it is not in the default state, then set it to the default state. All right. So if it is in the inactive state, set it to active. If it is in the active state, then set it to inactive. Right. So now I can click on this and right click and say add a comment, and I can say this condition checks which state the primary pill is in. All right. Perfect. So now if you see over here, when I press down, release my finger, it changes. Press down, release my finger, changes. So now we've got ourselves the button. The reason we're not touching the touchdown is because when the touchdown happens, we don't want it to do anything. We want this condition to run. So I release my finger first, then it checks the condition, and then depending on the condition, it chooses which state it has to switch it to, right? So this is basically what we want, right? So now I can come over here and I can close this up, or in fact, what I can do is I can select these two items, all right, and I can group them, and I can also say what this interaction is for. This is for selecting and deselecting just say selecting and deselecting, right? So selecting, deselecting. All right, so now if you go back to the filter screen and we click on the main one, all right, now you can see this is how it looks. Yeah, looks super cool, working well. All right, it's working. Of course, it's only working for this because that's the only condition we set up, but now we've got a lot of other work to do as well. If you come back over to Figma, you can see that the tapped primary pill setting to active, we are done with that. Now, the next thing we want to do is we want to hide the other pills. Now, what I actually want to do is I want to do this one first, all right? Because this gives that ability where we can just tap and we get the actual tab experience. So I'm going to create this one first, all right? So we set the other primary pills to inactive, right? So over here, basically, if we try to trigger this one, when I tap on traveling, all right, or actually this one, you can see that it switches from traveling to support and support to traveling. So let's go ahead and do that. Now, again, how do we do that? We need to make sure that when I select this element, it goes and checks all of the other children and sets that to the inactive state. So to explain that, I'm going to explain that over here. So let me just show you this. So in this case, let's say I tapped on experiences. Now what that means is that we need to target this item, and this item and set it to the inactive state. So all the other items other than the one I selected on needs to be reversed. Now, how do we do this? Now, if I bring up the inspector panels, you can see I've added annotations. And I've basically gone ahead and told you what are the index values. And we're going to do all of this with the power of index because this is also how engineers are going to do it. So let's add a loop condition where this item is the parent And then it is going to go and look at all of its children. So it's going to look at child 1, child 2, child 3, and child 4. In every child, it should select the item in the index 0 and deactivate it. So if we select this as the parent, this is the first child. It's going to go to this first child and say, hey, select the item in index 0 and deactivate it. Select the item in index 0 and deactivate it. Select the item in index 0 and deactivate it. All right. It's going to do the same for this one also, but we want to set a condition saying that if I tapped on this one, ignore this child. If I tapped on this one, ignore this child. If I tapped on this one, ignore this child, right? So let's see how to actually set this up slowly, step by step. So, but what you want to do is, first of all, you want to target this parent, all right? Now, because all the interactions are going to be on this, we need to, how do we target this parent from here? So coming back here to play, we have the primary pill, all right? Now I'm going to close this up. Now I'm going to go ahead and say touch down, because that's the trigger that we were having, as you can see over here. Now you can have multiple, touch up. We can have multiple of these. It's totally fine. It's going to work, right? So when I touch up, okay, I want you to do the loop, right? So the first thing that I want to do is from this, let's say I tapped on this one. I want to target the parent of this parent. So this thing's parent is this, and this thing's parent is this. This is what I want as the main parent for the loop. So I'm going to go ahead and click on plus and type in loop.children. We want to select the parent, which is this. Now, if I click on self, you can see that I don't have access to all the properties because I'm applying all of these interactions just to the primary pill. So this primary pill is, let's say, in your design system. It has no clue which screen it is going to be used in. So what are you going to do then? So what we will do is we will then decide saying that this thing is in a parent. So I'm going to click on this and I'm going to type in self.parent, all right? Or we can just say parent and it is still going to work, all right? In this case, I'm going to say self.parent for easy understanding. It's the same thing. Say self.parent. Now, when I say self.parent, it's actually targeting this one. But no, I wanted to target this thing's parent, which is over here. And this thing's parent is dot parent again. So parent dot parent. So now we're targeting this, as you can see over here. So now that we have targeted the parent, it's going to go ahead and talk to each of its children. So it's going to talk to this child, this child, this child, and this child. And it's going to say, look at your child, all right? And then see which element is in the index 0 and hide that, all right? So we're going to come over here and we're going to say, we want to say set state because that is the action we want to perform. We want to reverse it. So instead of loop item, all right, because this loop item is actually this. This has no state. This is just a container, right? Because if this is the parent, this is the loop item. We don't want this. We want the child of the loop item. So I'm going to go ahead and just remove this. I'm going to say child at the parent. Now here is the loop item. This is called loop item, right? This is the child. So I'm going to go ahead and type in loop dot, let's try that again. Loop dot item, that's the parent. Now index is this, okay, which is 0. All right. Now we can choose type and press enter. We can choose type. Let's choose the primary pill because this is actually the primary pill. All right. And then we want to set it. If you look at the conditions, we want to set it to the inactive state. So default state is the inactive state. Set that to animate. And we actually used default and I think we use 0.2. So let's go with that. Now let's see if this works. All right. It's not going to work and I'm going to tell you why, but I'm going to show you what's happening over here. So now when I click on homes, you can see that nothing is actually happening. And you can see it's flickering because what it's doing is that if I come over here, when I tapped on this, it is turning off this as well. When I tapped, or if I tap on this, if see experiences, you can see it does happen, but there's a flickering thing. It's turning off this as well. So now the question is, how do we exclude this one? If I tapped on home, how do we exclude the condition from running on this child? We want the condition to run on all the other ones. So let me show you how to do this. What we will do is we will identify the index of this parent. All right. So if I tapped on traveling, the index of this parent is actually 2 because there are 4 items. So we have 1, we have 2, we have 3, and we have 4. So we are going to capture the number 2 and say, go to child 0, go to child 1, ignore child 2, and then go to child 3, right? And we can actually identify what this number is because over here, we just have to target this parent, all right? So I'm going to come back to play, all right? And here, after the loop, all right, before we select this is the last part. This is the end. We can't add anything. So we have to add it before this. I'm going to go ahead and add a condition, all right? So I'm going to say, first of all, loop.item, the child's index, all right? If the child's index, all right, is equal to, all right, self.parent.index. So if the child's index is the same as the parent's index, which is essentially we are trying to say that apply this condition, and I can go ahead and add that over here, all right? Now, in fact, I should not say is equal to, I need to go ahead and say does not equal, all right? And I'm going to explain why, right? So now the value is 2. So this condition that we're doing is basically setting it to the inactive state, right? So we wanted to target all the children other than the one which has an index of 2 in this case, right? So this basically is exclude. So I can right click and say comment. This condition excludes the parent of the primary pill that was tapped. So here I can go ahead and add a comment, and here I can say target primary stack, right? Because primary stack, sorry, not primary stack, target the filters stack. So target filters stack, right? And so now if I play this, bring back the simulator, now you can see this works exactly like we want, right? Perfect. It works like a charm. Very similar to how a tab system filtration works. Of course, we've got a lot of other things to do, but this seems to be working super well. All right, amazing. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and click on this primary pill, and I'm just going to select all of this and group it. All right, or I can right click and can I group this or no? Command G. Yeah. Okay. And I'm going to hide all of this, and I'm just going to go ahead and rename this, all right, to call this primary pills to active, sorry, to inactive, right? And I can also add a comment. These interactions set all the primary pills to inactive other than the one that was tapped on. All right, great. Now the reason I am grouping this one is because we have a lot of other interactions also that we want to create, and all of these are triggered based on this touch up. So for touch up, it will do this. It will also do a bunch of other things as well. All right, so now we can go ahead and make sure that we have done with inactive over here. And I've already done that over here. So the next thing is we want to hide the other primary pills if I selected ones with more than one child, and I want to keep them and really not do anything if it is one child or less, right? So first let's add the condition. So now we're doing the second one. So I'm going to go ahead and type in condition, right? And here I'm going to say, if I tapped on this and this thing's parent has more than one child, then hide away this, this, and this, right? If I tap on this one, but it doesn't have multiple children, if it has only one child, then don't do anything, right? So what that means is I need to target this and check if this has multiple children. So how do we do that? So if self.parent, so if this thing, all right, dot child count, number of children, right? If the number of children of this parent that we just tapped on, so self.parent.child count, so self parent child count, right? If that is greater than 1, then hide this, and hide this. How do we do this? Same thing as we did before. Add another condition, all right? So here I can say, check the number of children in the primary stack, all right? If the number of children in the primary stack is greater than 1, then ignore this, but hide this, this, and this, right? Now, because we need to hide this, this, and this, we're applying the same action to multiple children, we need to use a loop. So actually, I'm going to create a loop, all right? Now, I want to select the correct pair. Now, here it says loop 2, which doesn't matter, leave that as it is. Here, I'm going to select the parent. Now, what is the parent that I want to select? Is because this is the child, these are the things that I want to hide, right? Because I want to hide all of this. These are the children of this. So to select this, I have to say parent.parent, right? So I'm going to say self.parent.parent. Okay. Now I selected it. Now I want to exclude this child, which is very similar to what we did above. So I'm going to add condition, and I'm going to say loop2.item.index, all right? If this is not equal to, so let's say I say not equal to, so is not equal to what, right? The index of this. So, and the index of this is 0, right? In this case. So if I tap on this, this thing's parent's index is 0. So I'm going to say self.parent.index, right? So I'm basically saying I've calculated and given you the index which you are supposed to ignore, right? Then go ahead and set hidden, because we want to hide the items, of loop2.item, which is the children, right? So because this is the parent, loop2.item is the child. So this is the child, this is the child, this is the child, hide all of them, all right? Set that to hidden and they disappear, right? So let's check this out in action. Now that's only going to work if the item that I selected has child count more than 1, right? If not, then it doesn't do anything. You can see there's nothing over here in the else. So let's check this out. Click on this one, bring back the simulator. All right. So now if let's say I click on support, nothing happens, which is perfect. I tap on traveling, nothing happens. What if I tap on experiences? Now you can see it hid away all the other ones. All right. I'm going to reset. If I tap on homes, you can see it hid away everything, right? So if I tap on experiences, goes away, homes goes away. So the interaction is working, but it's not really there yet, right? So close this up. Now, what we actually want to do is we want to scale them down before we hide them. We just don't want it to suddenly go. What we can do here is if we come back to this primary pill, let's go back over here to bring this down. All right. I'm going to first set a set scale, all right? And I'm going to set the scale down of that to 0. And I'm also going to animate it. So this one, we can do default because it is going away. and set this to 0.2. Okay. And so all of them will scale down. I also want to reduce down the opacity. So I can set the opacity of this also to 0. I can just duplicate that. Now here's the thing. These two have durations, but this one does not. So it hides immediately and then it scales down, which is super weird. So first we want it to scale down and then we want to hide it. So in order to sequence animations, right, what we need to do is use a new logic called as animate, right? So here in animate, I can control a sequence of actions. Once the sequence of actions are completed, then it does another one. So the first thing that I want to do here is I'm going to select these two items and drag them over here. So select these two again, yeah, and then drag them. So first, now you can see all the animation values, they ended up over here. So here I'm going to say 0.2 and I'm going to choose a normal default, all right? Once this is over, then it is going to go ahead and hide it, right? So first it does this animation over a duration of 0.2 seconds, and then it's going to go ahead and hide it. So now let's check how this looks. I'm going to bring back the simulator again. There we go. So now let's see support, all good. Traveling, all good. Switching between support and traveling, good. Now, let's tap on home. Now, you can see that you could see those things fading away, right? So if I reset it again, you can see them fading away, all right? And now you can see that because we hid it, it's not doing it like an infinite scroll, right? Now, what about experiences? If I do experiences, then you can see it goes away. Now, the problem here is that this still remains and it's not moving to the beginning, and that's okay, right? Now, if I check this back on, everything should come back up. That's another sequence that we'll look at, though that is basically resetting the animation, right? But for now, we're just going to go ahead and do the reveal, right? So now that this is done, we want to go ahead and do the next set of interactions, which is revealing the secondary buttons, right? Which is essentially secondary pills, making it visible, all right? So let's go ahead and first check all of these off. Let's not actually check these off, just strike through because we are done with this and we're done with this. Here, it's not really affecting, all right? There you go. Now, the secondary pills, we need to set that to visible. So how do we set that to visible? Now, let's actually understand how it was in the initial stage. Now, you can see over here that it was actually set to hidden. What we want is not only for it to unhide, but we also want it to scale in with opacity and scale. So we need to set the initial state of this, right? This is the onload event where we are hiding all the secondary children, all right? We want to set the scale of all the individual pills. So if I were to explain what's happening here is this thing is targeting the secondary stack, right? We actually want to target all the secondary pills. So when we're targeting multiple children, we want to use loop because this loop is hiding all the secondary stacks, right? Because it's targeting, as you can see, the secondary stack, right? It's targeting this one and this one. But we want to go one level further and target all of these children and all of these three children and set this to 0 scale and 0 opacity. So when you want to select child of a child, when we're using loops, we can click on this and add another loop, which is going to choose the children of this. So here, the parent is the filter stack, as you can see over here. And so this property targeted the second stack. So now if we want this to be the parent, all right, we basically need to copy this thing. So I'm going to copy this and paste that over here. So now this loop is targeting this one, all right? So copy this, and I can also go ahead and I can say add comment, paste that over here. Now, whatever action I add is going to affect all the children of this parent, which is the secondary stack. So I can click on plus over here, and then I can go and say set scale, set that to 0, and I can duplicate, and I can say set opacity also and set that to 0. Now, just to explain whether this is even working, I'm going to press D to sort of disable this first. And now you can see that those things are there. All right. And I can maybe even set this to, let's say, 30 and 30. So now you can see that individually all of these are scaling down and this thing is not yet hidden. So if I set this to 0, opacity goes, scale also is 0, and then I can turn this on to hide off that entire container, right? And that's basically how this works, right? And here I can say add comment, setting the scale and opacity of all the secondary pills to 0, right? Perfect. I can say here and set the opacity and plus scale of all the secondary pills to 0. All right. Nice. So now that it's 0 and opacity, now that scale 0, opacity 0, we can now set that to 100%, right? So coming back to the primary button over here. So over here, this was one thing, right? So when I touch up, it hides, as you can see, checks the number of children, and here it hides all of this. And now I can group this also. So I can actually press Command G, right? And this basically what it does is you can see it checks the number of children, all right? And then it hides the other parent pills, right? So this we can say hide other parent stacks. Okay. And I can add a comment over here. These interactions check if a parent stack has multiple children. If yes, hide all the parent stacks, and maybe make this capital. All right. If yes, hide all the other parent stacks other than the selected one. All right. To give an explanation. Now, we again need to now come back over here, target all the children and reveal them. So for example, over here, if I come over here, in this case, actually, let me just close all of this up. We don't need this, right? So if I tapped on this, I want you to target all of these children and animate them, right? So if I want to animate this, we're adding the same condition and same set of actions to multiple children. So we need to use loop, and the parent of the loop is going to be this. So now the question is, how do we target this as the parent? Pretty simple, right? So let's check this out. So come back to play, and I'm going to create a new one. I'm going to go ahead and say loop.children. All right. Now this is going to be loop 3. Doesn't matter. Ignore. Now we want to select the parent. We want to select this. How do I select this? This thing has an index of 1 because of the parent. So I can say, if this is the button that I tapped on, select the parent of this button and then see which element has the index of 1. So we basically have to say child at index 1. So if I come here to parent, I can go ahead and say child at index, right? Now the index is 1. So I can press 1 over here. But now what is the parent? The parent is this. And the way to trigger this is by saying self.parent. So I can say self.parent, right? So now I can add a comment and I can say targeting the secondary stack, all right? So now that's the parent. all right? And now anything that I apply is going to affect all the children. Now that I've selected the parent, which is this one, it's going to apply the children. So I'm going to go ahead and say set scale, set the scale to 100%. We can go ahead and add this one. So we can say 0.2. We can add a spring, should be nice over here. And you can also say opacity. For opacity, I don't want it to bounce. I just want it to be normal. So here we can keep it 0.2 spring, and that should be fine. So now let's see if this works, all right? And if I tap on home, it doesn't seem to work because we also need to unhide, right? We need to unhide the secondary stack, which we forgot to do. We only said this, we need to unhide the secondary stack as well. Because if you see over here, the secondary stack essentially was hidden, all right? Or I can basically say hide the secondary stack. So we need to unhide it, right? So let's go ahead and unhide it. I'm going to come here to the primary pill, close this up. All right, now we got to unhide it. So let's think about this, right? So first we want to unhide, and then we want to scale these up, right? Now, it's not just that. First, we want these primary pills to disappear, all right? So if you actually think about the sequence, all right? If we actually look at, let's say, this one. So when I tap on this, first the primary pills should disappear. After they disappear, we want to unhide the secondary stack and then reveal all of them. So this secondary stack needs to wait for a while before it can appear. Now this takes 0.2 seconds. So if we look at play, you can see that this takes 0.2 seconds. So what we can do here is we can add a thing called as animate, right? And we add a delay of 0.2 seconds. So we wait, right? And then we unhide, right? So I'm going to say set hidden, right? I'm going to unhide not the child, all right? Because this is going to trigger the child. This is going to essentially target these elements, right? I don't want it to target these elements because this is not hidden. This is the element that is hidden. So how do we do that? So what I can do is I will move this over here because I want this to happen first, all right? After a delay of 0.2, right? And now the target is actually this, right? Which is the same as this. I'm going to copy this and I'm going to click here and expression, paste this. So targeting the parent stack, because this is the one that I want to unhide. I'm going to add comment. I'm going to say unhide the parent. But the thing is, I want this to happen after 0.2 seconds. So I'm actually going to add something called as a delay. I'm going to say 0.2, all right? And then I can delete this one. I'm going to do this. Or actually, to be honest, let me actually use animate. That's better, right? So delay 0.2. I'm going to unhide this. And then after this is completed, we can take the loop and put that on complete, all right? So over here, I can say add comment. First, after primary, or let's say primary pills disappear, say 0.2 seconds. First, unhide the secondary stack, then animate in the secondary pills, right? Hope that makes sense. And one last thing is we want to turn this off so that we want to unhide it, right? Because obviously that's super important that we unhide it. And now we can go ahead and check, turn this on. And now when I tap on home, you can see it works, all right? So now we see a couple of weird things happening, right? And we're going to go ahead and fix that. So if you see over here that first it goes away, And then after a long time, this thing appears. So it's not immediate. It actually does take a long time. Let's see how we can fix that. All right. So over here, I'm going to set this duration to 0 because for some reason it's taking its own sweet time. So I'm going to set the duration to 0 and then see if that will fix the issue. And let's try that again. And now, as you can see, it worked, right? So it was adding another 0.35 seconds. And that's basically what we want. Perfect. Right? There we go. Now, let me just remove the color over here from this. All right. So I'm just going to remove the background color and remove the background color here as well. Okay. Now let's check this again. So I tap on homes. It comes in perfectly. It's super good. And you can see a very nice subtle bounce effect also. Right? You can even see the thing fading in very slow. If you want to see like a slow motion, you can go ahead and click on this and set this to, let's say, 0.5. And then you can also see that in action, how well it happens. All right. There we go. Nice. Now, one final thing that we want to do is over here, we want these elements to appear with a delay. So this appears first, and then this appears, and this appears. Now, again, without hard coding, how can we make sure that all of these come with a delay? We're going to use a very interesting concept over here. So I'm going to come back over here. Now, what we want to do is we want to add a delay. But how is this delay going to work? So let's go ahead and check Figma. So what we can do is we know the index value of this element. The index value of this is 0. The index value of this is 1. The index value of this is 2. Right? Now, because the loop3.item is essentially exactly this child, all right, because that's where the scale and the opacity is getting triggered, because that's the target, because this is the one that is scaling. This is loop3.item. So if this item has an index of 0, if we do some math, let's say 0 into, let's say 0.1, let's say 0.1 is the delay that we want. 0 into 0.1, or let's take 1 as a delay. So 0 into 1 is 0. 1 into 1 is 1. 1 into 2 is 2. So now this will have a delay of 0. This will have a delay of 1. This will have a delay of 2. So we're calculating the delay depending on the index value, right? So what that means, if I come to delay, now I have to target the index value of the child. So that is loop3.item. This is the child. This takes index value, all right? If let's say this is 0, I'm going to multiply this by, let's say, 1 second, all right? I'm going to do the same thing over here. Delay use expression. I'm going to say loop3.item.index. The index value of this, multiply this by 1. So if the index value is 0, the delay is going to be 0. If the index value is 1, the delay is going to be 1 second. If the index value is 2, the delay is going to be 2, right? So let's quickly check that out and see how this works. Let's reset. I'm going to set this to default speed and then play homes. And you can see 1, 2, and 3, right? Let's play that again. Homes, 1, 2, 3. Now, obviously, we don't want to be this low. We want to add a little bit more finesse to this. So instead of saying, let's say 1, we reduce it to 0.15, all right? Say this also to 0.15. And then we can come over here. Let's open this up again. And now you can see there's a little bit more nice delay, right? Looks super, super, super smooth, right? And it's also going to work for this also. So if I tap on experiences also, it's going to work. Now we need to move this to the left, which is another thing that we'll do that later, right? You can see this works. Now, one thing we can do is we can turn this on and off. So this thing is something that we can quickly do. We can just toggle tap on and off. So I can just quickly select the secondary pill. Now here, you can go ahead and use something called as a toggle tap. So if I just type in toggle, you can see that I can, on the first tab, it does something, on the second tab, it does something else. But now the question is that we actually have 4 states. So we need to identify which one it is. So if it is the default one, switch to active. If it is the default dropdown, switch to dropdown active. So we need to set up that condition. So which is why we can't use toggle tap. We have to set up our own one. And this is pretty simple, right? So let's say I tap on tap, all right? When I tap on it, I need you to check which state it is in. So I'm going to say condition, something that we did in the beginning. If self dot current state is equal to self dot states dot default, right? Now, if it is in the default state, all right, which essentially means if it is in this state, then you go to the active state, right? So we can go ahead and say set state to, I can set this to default, set it to the active state, animate 0.2, right? But if it is not, then what that means, it could either be in active state or drop down state or drop down. So it could be in either of these states. So which means we need a much more complex logic. So what we'll do here is if it is in default state, go to active state. If it is not in default state, then check which one it is in, right? So here I'm going to say condition, it's in this one, the else one, all right? If it is not in default state, check which is the other state is in, right? So I'm going to go ahead and say self, and actually I can just go ahead and copy this and paste this over here. And instead of default, I'm going to type in active. If it is in the active state, then I'm going to duplicate this one, bring this over here and set it back to the default state. If it is in active state, set it to the default state. But if it is not in the default state, it is not even in the active state, all right? But it is in the drop-down state. So I'm going to say condition. If it is in the drop-down default state, which is the inactive, then duplicate this. If it is in the drop-down default, then set it to active. If it is not, then the last one is essentially drop-down active. Then set it to drop-down default, right? So we're basically setting up this tree. So to sum up, if it is in the inactive state, set it to the active state. If not, check the next one. If it is in the active state, then check to inactive state. If it is not in the active state, it could be in the drop-down, either of the drop-down states. If it's in the drop-down default state, which is the drop-down inactive, set to drop-down active. And if it is not in drop-down inactive, which means it is in drop-down active, then set to drop-down inactive, which is default. All right. So now that's going to work. So if I go ahead and click on this, we bring up the simulator. Let's go ahead and bring up the simulator. And here in the simulator, I'm going to tap on homes. And now it's going to, when I click on this, you can see which one it is. All right. Now here, there is a small issue. I don't know what that is. We can look into that, but you can see this works perfectly. We also need that bounce effect of scale down. So let's go ahead and go to the primary pill. All right. And here we don't need all of this condition. All right. We probably need just this. So I'm going to select these 4, copy this, and maybe even the haptic as well. Copy this, come back to the secondary pill, or actually we can check it over here. Maybe that's better. Secondary pill, and I'm going to paste that over there. All right, there we go. We do touch down, move this up. Yep. So if it's touch down 94, touch up back to 100 with a this thing. We can also add this haptic to the tap trigger also. You know, it doesn't really matter. And in fact, we could also do this to be, instead of a touch up, we can actually move, instead of a tap, we can actually move all of this to the touch up, to be very honest. I can bring the haptic also over here, and then we can delete the tap. So we can do that condition over here. So touch up and touch down we can use. We don't really need a tap. So click on filters, open up the simulator. All right. And then let's see if this works. So there we go. Yeah, works perfectly. Looks amazing. Right now, this drop down thing isn't working for some reason. And let's see what the issue is. So if I come to secondary pill, this should ideally work. All right, so I just did some little debugging. All I did was just, delete these two values and then enter them again. And now you can see that it's working as we wanted. So I can come back here to the filters screen. And I was just doing some testing, so we can delete this one as well. And now I think should work. So I should tap on home and then I tap on trip stage and then you can see it works perfectly. Awesome, great. Looks super, super cool, super polished. We're almost getting there, but we just got a little bit more work to do. So this is fine. Experiences, yeah, we just checked that. Traveling works fine, support, all of that, experiences, yeah, looks super great. And yeah, now the next thing that we need to do is when I tap on support or traveling, we need to change the state of this all button. And if I tap on homes and experiences, I need to change this to different one. Now we already have that logic set up, right? So if I basically say, if I tap on traveling or support, then this button needs to change to the inactive state. If I tap on these two buttons, it should change to the one with the back arrow. So to quickly illustrate that, so if I come over here, you can see that if I tap on homes and experiences, the all button becomes the back button. If I tap on traveling and support, the all button becomes inactive, right? And we already have this condition based on number of children. So we can use that, right? So let's go back to play now and let's set this up. So I can close this, right? And over here, this is what we're going to do. So let's open up the primary pill again, because this is where we have all our interactions set up, which is crazy now that you see it. All right. Now this one, I can group this one and I can call this reveal link secondary pills. Right. And then we can lock this up. All right. We can duplicate. We can copy this condition and paste that over here. All right. And we don't really need all of this. We can delete that. All right. So I can click on this, right? So if the self parent dot child count is greater than 1, then we do all of this, all right, which is hiding the other parent stacks, all right? Hide the other parent stacks. But also we want to go ahead and set this all button to back. Now the question is, how in the world are we going to target this? So I have to select parent dot parent and the child of this that has an index of 0. So let's see how to do that. So if I open this up, let's just say cancel. We don't need this right now. I'm just going to close this up. So I need to select the specific child, and this in this case, I want to specifically select that one child. We don't want to select multiple children. We just want to set one. So I'm going to say set state. All right. And we're going to now select the item, right? So because we want to now select the specific item or specific child, we want to say child at index, all right? So I'm going to say child at index. Now the index of that child is 0, which this one is 0. Now what is the parent, right? Because now we have to set the parent. The parent is this thing's parent dot parent dot parent. So I'm going to go ahead and say self dot parent. Oh, let's try that again. Self dot parent dot parent dot parent. All right. Now say all pill and set the state to back. Let's animate it nicely. Say 0.2. All right. And if it is not, then we will come over here and set this to default state, right? So if it is the one with multiple children, we set it to back button. If it is not, we set it to the inactive state, right? So let's quickly check this out and see if this works. All right, so now I'm going to tap on traveling. Now you can see it changed to the correct one. If I tap on support, also it is. Now let's just try restarting from support. If I tap on support, it goes back. Now, if I tap on homes, you can see it needs to transition to this one, right? So if I tap on experiences, you can see it scales, right? Now, let me actually slow down the animation, let's say by 0.05x so that we can see how this works. So you can see that, there we go, and scales in, right? So there is something weird that's happening. the text doesn't seem to be moving around and going properly. So let's see if we can fix that. So I'm going to come down back over here to the all pill, press number 3, go to the main thing. All right. So let's see how this is structured. So we've got the label and the arrow. All right. So the label, everything is fine. The arrow also, everything is fine. So what I'll do is I'm going to select this whole thing and I'm going to say reset the all pill over here. All right. We have this arrow. If I set this back to 100 and set the scale to 0, you can see where it is. So I'm going to set it back to 0 and 0 on the scale. And then over here, this thing, the width of the back button, I'm going to set that to 40, which for some reason also reduces the size of this. So instead, what I would then do is I will select the back thing and I will reduce the padding until I get a value of 40. Maybe that's better, right? So we set the right padding to, let's say, 8 and 8. Reduce a little bit more, 3, 4. And then 1 and 1. There we go. So now we got 40 and 40. And now this label that we have, I'm going to set a negative offset of -20. And then we can set the scale of this down to 0. So let's see, where is this? The opacity, why can't I find it? So yeah, scale 0, and also the opacity will be 0. All right, now this should work really well. So let's give it a check. Let's bring up the simulator. Let's make sure that we say 0.05x. And now you can see it sort of work, but we also have this issue where it's going. So what we can try to do is we can come here and we can give this to have a minimum width. So I can go to the all pill, all right? And in the more, I can give it a minimum width of actually 40 pixels, or actually, yeah, minimum width of 40 points. Right? And maybe this should also work right now. Let's give it a shot. Yeah, it's working. I think we need to move the arrow mark a little bit more to the right, in my opinion. So I'm going to select this, now the secondary, the all pill. Yeah. Come back to the main one, and here the arrow, I think I'm going to move it maybe another 10 pixel. All right. So let's say if I set this scale to 100, all right, there we go. Maybe we make this to 40. Let's say if that's good. And then now we set the opacity to 0, scale again, back to 0. And now let's check out the filter screen. Yeah. So now it looks okay. Yeah, I think it looks okay now. Anyway, so now that we've got this, and this also works. Obviously, when I reset, we have to do the whole reset animation, but we're pretty much there. When I click on support, it works fine. I tap on traveling, it looks fine. Right? So the next thing for us to do is, now that when I click on experiences, I need to actually move it over here. And now the experiences also is doing something weird. Right? Oh yeah, we need to change the background color of this and add the stroke as well. So let's actually fix that super quickly. So in the all pill, close this up. We have this. We want to go ahead and select the border. Click on this. We want to set this to 100%. And also from surface primary, I want to change this to the styles. And we want to choose surface, or actually background, because that's the basic one. That's the standard one. There we go. All right. So let's go back over here. Let's give this a nice check. Bring up the simulator. Yeah, there we go. So this is like fine. We can also check this in dark mode and see if everything is working fine. All of this is good. This one doesn't seem to be using the correct one. So let me just go ahead and clean that up very quickly. So we click on the all pill. In the border, we need to use the right token. So I'm going to go and choose border primary as the token. Set this to 0. And then for the back one, this also needs to use border primary. There we go. And 100. All right. So now this should look good. Yeah. Yes. Perfect. Reset. Go back to light. There we go. Change this to dark. Perfect. Change this to light. Perfect. All right. Looking good. So let's go back to dark again. Let's reset. Let's tap on traveling. Yeah. There we go. Amazing. All right, so the next thing for us to do is to move the experiences to the left of the screen. That will finish one part, and then we can go ahead and trigger the reverse animations. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, now in this case, we have to hard code things a little bit, only because it's a very specific case that we have, that when I tap on this, it does not move. When I tap on this, it does not move, neither this. So only when I tap on the second one, does it move to the left. And that's why we have to go ahead and set up that logic. All right. Now, there could be a possibility where we could have, let's say, another filter. Let's say traveling also had sub filters. Then we could still come up with a logic saying that whether I tap on 2 or 3, it automatically moves, right? Now, in this case, I'm going to hard code because it's only one element. But in case we had multiple elements that had secondary filters, then you would add a single logic that would move them to the start of the stack. So in this case, we're going to hard code with this one. Now, this one is pretty simple because all we have to do is we have to say if the parent index is 1, then move this to the left, right? So that's what we're going to do. So I'm going to come here to the primary pill, come here to the interactions, and we have this. All right. We also have, let me close this up. We have this one as well. This is revealing secondary pills. This one is essentially, what one is this doing? This is checking the number of pills, and then this is triggering the pill animation. All right. So I can go ahead and group this, and I can say sets pill to back or inactive. All right. So this is that. Now over here, what we want to do is take this. All right. And essentially what we're going to do is I'm going to go here and say condition. So if self dot parent, all right, dot index. All right. Now, if the index of that is equal to 1, all right. So which means I'm going to come over here and say if the index of the parent of this element is equal to 1, then move this to the left. Now, the question is, how much do we move it to the left, right? The thing is, first, we need to cover up this gap of 8 pixels that we have. And then, I mean, of course, here it's not 8, but in actual terms, it's actually in the values that we're using is 8. So here we need to add 8. So it moves over here. And then we also need to move over here. So what does that actually mean? So if I bring up the simulator, all right, and let me zoom out and I can click on this, right? Let me go back to light mode. All right. So here we want this experiences to move all the way to the beginning, which means it needs to cover 8 pixel and also the width of this. So now the question is, how much is the width of this? Because if let's say we change the name of this to be a shorter or a longer name, it should still be able to go and sit exactly over here. So instead of hard coding a specific value, we're going to say 8 pixels plus the width of this component, right? So now the question is, how do we target this component? So if you come back here to Figma, this is what we have. So because I'm clicking on this one, I need to go ahead and target this parent. All right. Now, what is this parent? How do I go from there? So I first select this parent. All right. And then I select this parent. And then I select this child. And then I select this child. All right. So we have to go through a very big connection to get here. So let's see how to do that. So to repeat again, we start off over here. All right. And then I'm going to say this thing's parent, the child of this, and then we select this child, right? So because we're specifying this child, we need to use child at index. So I'm gonna come back to play over here and we need to go back to the parent one, all right? And we can click over here. And now I'm gonna go ahead and say offset. Offset basically is the position of X, all right? And now we obviously want to target this item. We want the offset to be over here. We want this to animate, all right? So we can start off with 0.2 and then see if we want to increase this up. And then we want to go ahead and change the duration. Now, not the duration actually, the value. So now, essentially it's going to be 8 pixels plus now the width of that element. So I'm going to start off by saying child at index, all right? We want this index to be 0, all right? Because if I come here to Figma, this has an index of 0, all right? So as you can see, this has an index of 0. And then I go one level above and select this parent. Now, that's what I need to enter here. But this parent is what? This parent is actually the first child of this parent, all right? So I'm going to go ahead and say child at index again. I'm going to set this to 0. And this one is going to be called self.parent. Let's try that again. Self.parent. All right, there we go. So to quickly explain what's happening again, we want to target this one. This one has a child at index 0, which is over here. So child at index 0, all right? Now, which means we need to select the parent. Now, what is this parent? Is this one. How do we target this parent? This parent is the first child of this parent, all right? So that's why I'm adding another one is this parent is the first child of this parent. Now, how do I check this parent? This parent is the parent of this, right? I'm going to say self.parent.parent, which targets this, okay? And then it's targeting the child at index of 0, which is over here. And then, so now this has become one parent. And then the index of that child, essentially of this button, is 0. And we're using child at index to target that. And then we're going to add 8 pixels of that. Now, it's not just that. We also need to do dot width, right? Now we have the math. So now let's go ahead and test this and see if this works. It's going to come here to filters, bring this up. Now I tap on experiences and now you can see it moves to the right side. We actually just needed to move to the left side. So I'm going to come over here, come here to properties, right? And I'm going to say, put all of this into a bracket. And then I'm going to go say into -1. So when you say -1, obviously you add the minus symbol. Is there. Now, the other thing here is that the target, we actually, right now, we're only targeting this. We want to target this whole section. So what is the whole section? It's called self.parent. So I'm going to click on target, expression, and then I'm going to say self.parent. So then it moves the whole thing to the left side. So now this should work exactly how we want it. Let's go ahead and check this out. Yeah, let's open this up. There we go. And now when I tap on experiences, you can see it moves to the left, right? Let's try that again. Tap on experiences, moves super well, right? We can go ahead and probably reduce the increase the speed, maybe 0.35. All right, let's see if that's nicer. Something a little bit more buttery and smooth. Why did I close that? Open this up. And then over here, yeah, definitely a lot more smoother and nicer. All right, there we go. And this works as needed, so no problems over here. So that brings us to the end of part 1. And in part 2, we're going to go ahead and reset the entire animation so that we have an actual functional prototype with us that we can play around and share with others. So that's pretty much it for this video, guys. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you guys really enjoyed it. If you did, let me know in the comment sections down below. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more amazing, awesome content. And I'll see you guys in my next video. So till then, take care and bye-bye.